Welcome back, guys, to Explore Americana. James here. We are standing here in front of Fort Scott in Kansas. We're going to walk around the grounds here and take a look at some of these buildings. Got a little storyboard about Fort Scott. It says Fort Scott tells America's story during a critical time in its growth. When the fort was established, most of the nation's population lived east of the Mississippi. However, soon soldiers from Fort Scott would be part of westward expansion, bleeding Kansas, and ultimately the Civil War. Fort Scott emerged from these crises as a prominent town in the new state of Kansas. It says it was established in 1842, named after General Winfield Scott. Fort Scott was one of several forts, including Fort Leavenworth to the north, which enforced this permanent Indian frontier. In what was then unorganized territory, this fort's role was to keep white settlers out and make sure relations with and between relocated tribes like the Miami, New York Indians, Potawatomi, and Ottawa, and local tribes like the Osage remained peaceful. Typically, Fort Scott housed both a company of infantry and one of the dragoons, precursors to the cavalry. During the 1840s, the dragoons also helped maintain peace along the Santa Fe and Oregon trails, which passed through what is now the state of Kansas. From 1846 to 1848, Fort Scott's troops left to fight in the Mexican-American War. The Army abandoned Fort Scott shortly before Kansas Territory opened to Euro-American settlement in 1854. The remaining buildings were sold the next year, forming the nucleus of the city of Fort Scott. Right now we're upstairs in what was the hospital. They got a fully restored hospital in here, or ward room. See here, right there in the middle is the powder magazine. We're gonna work our way around clockwise. This right here is one of the infantry barracks. Oh, all right. A most deplorable condition. During the Civil War, the ground in front of you witnessed both hope and despair as a haven for refugees. Fort Scott offered a respite from war, but conditions here all too often spawned tragedy. The war transformed the Fort Scott area into a refugee center harboring a broad mix of Indians, slaves, free blacks, and white settlers. Most were women, children, and elderly men. Three buildings from the former fort served as hospitals for both soldiers and civilians. At times, tents sheltered the overflow of sick and wounded. You see the pictures with the tents set up right here. Over there's the officers' quarters. Here are the Western Hotel, symbol of strife. It says after the Army sold Fort Scott in 1855, the infantry barracks located here, reconstructed in front of you, became the pro-slavery Western Hotel. The building across the parade ground directly behind you became the anti-slavery Free Hotel. The two hotels symbolize the strife over slavery that divided Kansas in the late 1850s, an era known as Bleeding Kansas. Violence visited Fort Scott often during Bleeding Kansas, and the Western Hotel played a role of several incidents over whether Kansas would be free or slave. Line of Fort Scott, 1842 to 1853. It was built to guard the new military road from Fort Leavenworth south into what is now Oklahoma, as well as the permanent Indian frontier. 1854 to 1860, the city of Fort Scott begins. (1861) to 1865, Fort Scott in the Civil War. The conflict brought the Army back to the thriving town, which had grown up around the abandoned post. The Army rented back most of their former buildings and occupied or built many more throughout the town. Fort Scott was an import supply base and staging area for the Union Army. Says, although Fort Scott was never attacked by the Confederates, several major battles occurred within 100 miles. The military role of Fort Scott ended in April 1865 when the Confederacy collapsed. The last troops marched away in October 1865. So Fort Scott became a center for the railroads between 1869 and 1900. So picture of the 1920s Main Street. Fort Scott was the guardian of the permanent Indian frontier. Goosewing, broadaxe, powder horn, and a horseshoe. Indian culture on the plains evolved from few people on much land, based on hunting, wild plant gathering, and minimal casual farming. It caused little change in the environment. It was quite different from European custom. Had some moccasins, a couple arrowheads there, a horn spoon, and stone axe heads. A picture of the Fort Scott Dragoons. It's very hard to see. Dragoon saber and a Mississippi rifle. Pitchforks. Saddles. Buggy. Says the interior of this reconstructed stable is divided into 3 sections, each with the following use. There's the Dragoon barracks. Like they're doing the fire suppression system, but we can still Looks like poker heads in here. This is the company office. And here's the laundry room. Little clothespins. This is what is called officers' row. Says that the walkway in front of officers' row, which is elevated, was off limits by enlisted men and post laundresses. Says they used a separate walkway from their barracks to the well. So I think that's the well over there. So they were not allowed to go. And these are completely closed off. Little storyboard here. Title, But I Can Fire a Pistol. It says, but remember this, I am a girl, but I can fire a pistol, and if ever the time comes, I will send some of you to the place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Seeing Campbell's, hope I'm saying that right, saying her name right, anger testifies to the hatred and ill will prevalent during the pre-Civil War era called Bleeding Kansas, and to her anguish over the violence on this site that ended the life of her fiancé, pro-slaver John Little. This is the gun shed. An unusual feature of the headquarters building at Fort Scott was the inclusion of a separate storage room for the post artillery and ordnance on display. In this shed during the winter are two replica 1841 6-pound guns, a limber and a 12-pound mount howitzer mounted on a prairie carriage. Each artillery piece was described by the weight of the projectile fired from it, hence the name 6-pound gun, 12-pound mountain howitzer. Okay. Pretty neat. So it's call 911 Civil War style. Today when we get hurt, we can call an ambulance and get whisked away to the hospital quickly. During the Civil War, they did not have the luxuries we do today. In the beginning of the war, there were not enough ambulances to carry all the wounded, so many soldiers died from lack of care. To counter this, medical director of the Union Army, Dr. Jonathan Letterman, created the first ambulance corps in August 1862. When this unit was first implemented at the Battle of Antietam, medical personnel were able to remove all of the wounded from the field in just 24 hours, saving hundreds of soldiers' lives. So, old Civil War ambulance. So, what I was told, this fort All these trees that are around here were never here. This was all open prairie, and the wood to build the buildings was got from a mill about 5 miles upstream from here and sent over. And this fort never had walls. I believe they said it had like basically a big ditch all the way around it, pretty much. Highway right there. Go check out these two buildings over here. Let's see. It's like a storage building. Yep, this is all storage. Pickle and Preserve Works. Extra brandied pickle or peaches. Goodness, if I can read. Salt beef, salt pork, flour, these old barrels, coffee. So it's a supply store. Wow, the layers on this building, so neat. Up the Missouri, down to Fort Scott. Really. So this is the quartermaster's area. Okay, so this was the enlisted men's latrine area. Okay. Well, that answered my question. Got a couple more buildings. See if we can check out this building over here, which I believe is the quartermaster's office. I'm not 100% sure, so we're going to find out. No, this was a infantry barracks. dark and gloomy looking sky. This is a very well done national park, historic site. Free to get in. All right, let's go over here and see what this is. The well. All right, I believe, yes, this was the well. Well. Walk over here and check out the powder magazine before we head out. Our artillery piece right there. Here's how thick that door is. That is, I think I said the walls are 3 feet thick. So here's the powder magazine. Black powder. Dome up there. He said they would have to, before they could come in here, the soldiers would have to take their boots off because they could start a spark with the nails in their shoes or their boots. All right, it's pretty cool. Fort Scott National Historic Site is more than just a collection of old buildings. It's a living history lesson. I hope this visit inspires you to explore more of America's hidden gems. If you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more adventures with Explore Americana. Till next time, keep exploring.